something that was already connected to me. I stood up again, this time not out of reaction but out of alignment. Because now the situation wasn't unclear anymore. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't personal. It was structured. And structure can be understood. I walked into the bedroom again, looking at the same closet, the same space, the same things. But now the perspective was different. Before, it looked like something I might have to leave behind. Now it looked like something temporary. Because this wasn't my ending. It was hers. She just didn't know it yet. I checked the time. Still hours left before the deadline she gave me. Enough time. More than enough. I picked up my phone and scrolled back to that same contact. This time I didn't hesitate. I called. It rang once. Twice. Then connected. I need confirmation, I said. No greeting. No explanation. Because when you're dealing with something real, you don't waste time on unnecessary words. There was a pause on the other end, then a calm voice replied, "About what?" "The transfer," I said. "It just activated." Another pause. Longer this time. Then, "You're sure?" "I heard it directly," I replied. That was enough. Because the tone shifted immediately. "Then it's already in motion," the voice said. And that sentence confirmed everything. Not just that the money existed, but that it was part of something larger. Something ongoing. Something controlled. "Who initiated it?" I asked. But I already knew the answer. "I think you know that," the voice replied. And I did. Because there was only one person who could move something like that. Only one person who had both the authority and the reason. And she thought she inherited it. That part almost made me smile. Not out of humor. Out of understanding. Because she wasn't given power. She was given position. And position without understanding doesn't last. I ended the call without saying anything else. Because there was nothing left to confirm. Everything I needed was already clear. I walked back into the living room, slower this time, more deliberate. Not because I was thinking, but because I wasn't. That part was over. Now it was about timing. Execution. Observation. Because the mistake she made wasn't leaving. It wasn't even the way she said it. The mistake was assuming she was in control. And control is something you don't declare. It's something you prove. I sat down again and looked at the door. The same door she expected me to walk out of. The same door she believed marked the end of my place in her life. But what she didn't understand was simple. I wasn't being removed. I was being repositioned. And the difference between those two things changes everything. I picked up my phone one last time and sent a single message. No emotion. No explanation. Just information. Because that's how things like this move. Quietly. Precisely. Without attention. Then I placed the phone back down and leaned back, letting the silence return. Not empty. Not uncertain. Controlled. Because now there was nothing left to figure out. Only something left to watch. And as the minutes passed, one thing became clearer with every second. She thought this was her moment. Her turning point. Her step into something bigger. But in reality, she had just stepped into something that was already built. Already designed. Already in motion. And the most important part, she had no idea who built it. I didn't leave. Not because I couldn't, but because there was no reason to. The deadline she gave me wasn't pressure. It was assumption. And assumptions only work when the other person plays along. I wasn't playing along. I was watching. Waiting. Letting everything move exactly the way it was supposed to. The apartment stayed quiet after the call. Not heavy. Not emotional. Just still. Like everything inside it had paused, waiting for the next moment to arrive. And I didn't interrupt that. I didn't start packing. I didn't make calls. I didn't move toward the door she expected me to walk out of. Because I already knew something she didn't. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet. Time passed slowly, but not in a way that felt long. In a way that felt precise. Every minute had purpose. Every second added weight to what was coming next. And then, right on time, the door opened. She walked in without hesitation, without caution, like someone who had already decided everything before stepping inside. Her posture was different. Lighter. More confident. Like whatever she had gained had removed something from her instead of adding to her. Or maybe, she just believed it did. She stopped when she saw me. Just slightly. Just enough to notice something wasn't the way she expected. "You're still here?" she said. Not angry. Not emotional. Just surprised. And that was the first sign. Because she didn't expect resistance. She expected compliance. "I am," I replied. Come. Simple. No explanation attached. She looked around briefly, like she was confirming that nothing had changed, then back at me. I told you to be gone by tonight. I heard you, I said. And the moment those words left my mouth, something shifted. Because hearing something and following it aren't the same thing. She stepped further inside and closed the door behind her. The sound echoed slightly, sharper than usual, like it marked the beginning of something neither of us had planned for. You don't seem to understand, she said. That line came out naturally, almost automatically. Like it was part of the role she had already stepped into. The role where she had control. The role where I didn't. But that role didn't fit anymore. I understand perfectly, I said. And that's when her expression changed. Not dramatically. Not completely. But enough. Because confidence depends on certainty. And certainty only exists when nothing challenges it. No, she said, shaking her head slightly. You don't. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her, steady, calm, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do in a moment like that is nothing. You said you inherited 50 million, I said after a pause. Her posture straightened slightly, like the number itself carried weight. Yes. No hesitation. No doubt. Just belief. And you think that changes everything, I continued. It does, she replied instantly. And that right there was the mistake. Because when someone believes something that strongly without understanding it, they're standing on something unstable. I stood up slowly, not to confront her, not to overpower the moment, but to shift it. Because standing changes perspective. It changes presence. It changes control. I don't think you know what you inherited, I said. And that sentence didn't hit loudly. It hit quietly, which made it stronger. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in focus. Because now something didn't align. What does that mean? She asked. And that tone was different. Not confident. Not dismissive. Careful. It means, I said, that what you think is yours wasn't given to you the way you believe. She let out a small breath, like she was trying to dismiss it before it settled. It's in my name, she said. I have access. That's all that matters. But it wasn't. And the moment I saw that response, I knew. She didn't understand any of it. That's not ownership, I said quietly. And now, silence. Not the same silence as before. This one was different. This one had weight. Because something had just entered the space that wasn't there before. Doubt. She didn't like that. I could see it in the way she held herself, the way her posture adjusted slightly, the way her eyes stayed on mine a little longer than before. Where are you getting this from? She asked. And that question wasn't about dismissing me. It was about understanding something she hadn't considered. I've seen how this works, I said. Not explaining. Not revealing. Just enough. And that was all it took. Because now she wasn't speaking from certainty anymore. She was trying to hold on to it. I don't care how it works, she said. It's mine now. But even she didn't fully believe that anymore. Because when doubt enters, it doesn't leave easily. You should care, I replied. And that line didn't challenge her. It warned her. And warnings only come when there's something real behind them. She looked at me differently now. Not as someone she had already removed from her life. Not as something temporary. But as something she hadn't fully understood yet. And that's when the real shift happened. Not outside. Inside. Because for the first time since she made that call, she wasn't completely sure. And uncertainty changes everything. I didn't step closer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push the moment. Because I didn't need to. It was already moving. You told me to leave, I said. Yes, she replied, but it didn't sound the same anymore. And you thought that was the end of this, I continued. She didn't answer. Because now, she was listening. Not controlling. Not deciding. Listening. And that difference was everything. It's not, I said, simple, clear, final. And as the silence filled the room again, it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full. Full of something new. Awareness. Because the moment she thought she had control was the moment she started losing it. She just didn't realize it yet. But she would. Very soon. I replied. She didn't respond right away. And that silence was different from before. Not controlled. Not confident. Uncertain. Because for the first time since she walked into that room, she wasn't standing on something solid anymore. Whatever certainty she carried when she made that call had shifted. Not completely. Not enough for someone else to notice. But enough for me. I didn't interrupt it. I didn't rush to explain more. Because moments like that don't need pressure. They need space. Space for something to settle. Space for something to break. "You're overthinking this," she said finally. And that line came out almost automatically, like she was trying to return to something familiar, something simple, something she could control again. But this wasn't simple. "I'm not thinking," I replied. And that wasn't a reaction. It was clarity. Because thinking comes from uncertainty. And I wasn't uncertain anymore. She looked at me differently now, not dismissively, not confidently, but carefully. Like she was trying to figure out something she hadn't considered before. "You said it was an inheritance," I continued. "Yes," she said, "but this time there was something missing from it. Certainty. And you didn't question where it came from," I said. That landed. Not loudly. But deeply. "I was told everything I needed to know," she replied. And that answer sounded weaker than she expected. "By who?" I asked. She paused. Just slightly. But enough. Because now, there was something she didn't want to say. "That doesn't matter," she said. But it did. It mattered more than anything. Because money like that doesn't move without reason. It doesn't appear without structure. It doesn't land in someone's life without being connected to something that already exists. And she stepped into it, without understanding any of that. "That's the only thing that matters," I said quietly. And this time I didn't wait. Because now, it was time. "You think you were given something," I said. "But you weren't." Her eyes stayed on mine, sharper now, more focused, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping. "What are you talking about?" she asked. And now, that tone had changed. Not confident. Not controlled. Searching. "You weren't given control," I continued. "You were placed into something." That sentence didn't need emphasis. It didn't need volume. Because timing did all the work. "That doesn't make any sense," she said. But it didn't sound like certainty anymore. It sounded like resistance. "It will," I replied. And I let the moment breathe. Because realization doesn't happen instantly. It builds. Piece by piece. "You said it's in your name," I added. "That you have access." "Yes," she said again, but now it felt like she was convincing herself more than me. "And that's exactly how it works," I said. She didn't respond. Because now, she was listening. Not defending. Not controlling. Listening. "Access isn't ownership," I continued. "It's permission." And that word changed everything. Permission. Because permission means something exists above you. Something allowing. Something controlling. Something deciding. Her expression shifted again, small but undeniable. The kind of shift that doesn't come from emotion, but from realization starting to form. "That's not possible," she said. But this time, it sounded like doubt. Not belief. "It is," I replied. And I didn't add anything else. Because I didn't need to. She took a small step back without realizing it, like her body adjusted before her mind did. Because something inside her had already started to change. "You're saying, this isn't mine?" she asked. And that question was the moment everything turned. Because now she wasn't defending anymore. She was trying to understand. "I'm saying you don't know what it is yet," I replied. Careful. Precise. Because truth doesn't always come from giving answers. Sometimes, it comes from removing what someone thinks they know. She stayed quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was active. Moving. Processing. Because now, she was thinking. Really thinking. And that's when control disappears. Not when someone argues. Not when someone reacts. But when they realize they don't understand the situation they thought they controlled. "I was told it's fully transferred," she said. And now, that line didn't carry strength. It carried uncertainty. "It is," I replied. And that answer caught her off guard. Because she expected resistance. Not agreement. But that doesn't mean what you think it means. And that was it. The shift. The moment where everything she believed started breaking. I didn't step closer. I didn't push further. Because I didn't need to. The moment had already moved far enough. "You told me to leave," I said again. She didn't respond. Because now, that statement didn't hold the same power. "And you thought that meant something changed," I continued. Still silence. Because she couldn't say yes anymore. Not with the same certainty. "Nothing changed," I said. And that line didn't challenge her. It grounded everything. Because this was never about the call. Never about the words. Never even about the money. It was about control. And control was never where she thought it was. The room felt different now. Not tense. Not emotional. Clear. Because we weren't standing in assumptions anymore. We were standing in reality. And reality doesn't need to explain itself. It just needs to exist. She looked at me again, but not the same way as before. Not with certainty. Not with control. With awareness. Because for the first time since everything started, she understood something she wasn't ready for. She wasn't in control. She never was. She didn't say anything after that. And this time, it wasn't silence she was controlling. It was silence she was inside. Because everything she thought she understood just hours ago had shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of shift that doesn't break things instantly, but makes them impossible to hold on to. I didn't rush the moment. I didn't add more. Because there was nothing left to explain. Everything that needed to be understood already was. She looked at me not the way she did when she walked in, not with certainty, not with control, but with something else entirely. Awareness. And awareness changes everything. You knew, she said quietly. Not accusing. Not emotional. Just realizing. And that sentence confirmed it. Because she wasn't asking anymore. She was connecting. I recognized it, I replied. And that was enough. Because I didn't need to claim anything. I didn't need to prove anything. The truth doesn't rely on explanation when the structure around it is already visible. She took a slow breath, like she was trying to steady something inside her that didn't feel stable anymore. Why didn't you say anything before? She asked. And that question came too late. Because it wouldn't have mattered, I said. Come. Simple. True. Because people don't hear truth when they believe they already have control. They only hear it when that control starts slipping. And now, it had. She looked away briefly, then back at me like she was trying to rebuild something that wasn't there anymore. So what does this mean? She asked. And for the first time, she wasn't speaking from above the situation. She was inside it, trying to understand it. It means, I said, that what you stepped into wasn't yours to begin with. And that sentence didn't land as a challenge. It landed as a realization. Because now, she could see it. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. You're saying I don't have control, she said. And this time, it wasn't resistance. It was acceptance starting to form. I'm saying you never did, I replied. And I didn't soften it. Because truth doesn't need to be softened. It just needs to be clear. She didn't argue. She didn't push back. And that told me everything. Because the moment someone stops defending something is the moment they stop believing in it the same way. I took a step back, not because I needed distance, but because I didn't need to stand in that moment anymore. It had already reached its end. You told me to leave, I said. She didn't respond. Because now, that statement didn't hold the same meaning. And you thought that meant something was over, I continued. Still nothing. Because she couldn't say it again. Not with the same certainty. This was never about leaving, I said quietly. And that line closed everything. Because it reframed the entire moment. This wasn't about her decision. It wasn't about the call. It wasn't about the money. It was about understanding. And she didn't have it. Not when it mattered. She looked at me again, but this time there was no attempt to control the situation. No attempt to reposition herself inside it. Just stillness. Because now, there was nothing left to hold on to. What happens now? She asked. And that question was the final shift. Because now she wasn't deciding. She was asking. And that difference was everything. I looked at her for a moment, not emotionally, not with anger, not with anything that needed to be expressed, just clearly. Now, I said, you figure out what you actually stepped into. And that was it. No explanation. No warning. Because some things aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be experienced. She didn't respond. Because she didn't have anything left to say. And I didn't wait for her to find something. Because I wasn't there for that. I turned toward the door, not slowly, not dramatically, just moving with the same calm certainty that had carried through the entire moment. This time, I was leaving. Not because she told me to, but because I chose to. And that difference is everything. I reached for the door, opened it, and stepped outside without looking back. Because looking back suggests there's something unfinished. And there wasn't. The hallway felt quiet but not heavy. Clear. Open. Like stepping out of something that no longer held meaning. I walked forward, each step steady, not rushed, not delayed, just certain. Because sometimes closure doesn't come from fixing something. It comes from understanding it. And leaving it exactly where it is. Behind you. I stepped out of the building and into the open air, the city moving the same way it always had, unchanged, unaffected by what had just happened. And that's the truth about moments like this. They feel like everything should stop, but nothing does. Everything keeps moving, except you. For a moment. And then, you move too. Not because you're ready, but because you understand. And as I walked forward, one thing was completely clear. She thought that call ended everything. But it didn't. It revealed it. And sometimes, that's more powerful than anything else. Not completely, but enough. You're saying I don't have control, she said. And this time, it wasn't resistance. It was acceptance starting to form. I'm saying you never did, I replied. And I didn't soften it. Because truth doesn't need to be softened. It just needs to be clear. She didn't argue. She didn't push back. And that told me everything. Because the moment someone stops defending something is the moment they stop believing in it the same way. I took a step back, not because I needed distance, but because I didn't need to stand in that moment anymore. It had already reached its end. You told me to leave, I said. She didn't respond. Because now, that statement didn't hold the same meaning. And you thought that meant something was over, I continued. Still nothing. Because she couldn't say it again. Not with the same certainty. This was never about leaving, I said quietly. And that line closed everything. Because it reframed the entire moment. This wasn't about her decision. It wasn't about the call. It wasn't about the money. It was about understanding. And she didn't have it. Not when it mattered. She looked at me again, but this time there was no attempt to control the situation, no attempt to reposition herself inside it. Just stillness. Because now, there was nothing left to hold on to. What happens now? She asked. And that question was the final shift. Because now she wasn't deciding. She was asking. And that difference was everything. I looked at her for a moment, not emotionally, not with anger, not with anything that needed to be expressed, just clearly. Now, I said, you figure out what you actually stepped into. And that was it. No explanation. No warning. Because some things aren't meant to be explained. They're meant to be experienced. She didn't respond. Because she didn't have anything left to say. And I didn't wait for her to find something. Because I wasn't there for that. I turned toward the door, not slowly, not dramatically, just moving with the same calm certainty that had carried through the entire moment. This time, I was leaving. Not because she told me to, but because I chose to. And that difference is everything. I reached for the door, opened it, and stepped outside without looking back. Because looking back suggests there's something unfinished. And there wasn't. The hallway felt quiet but not heavy. Clear. Open. Like stepping out of something that no longer held meaning. I walked forward, each step steady, not rushed, not delayed, just certain. Because sometimes closure doesn't come from fixing something. It comes from understanding it. And leaving it exactly where it is. Behind you. I stepped out of the building and into the open air, the city moving the same way it always had, unchanged, unaffected by what had just happened. And that's the truth about moments like this. They feel like everything should stop. But nothing does. Everything keeps moving. Except you. For a moment. And then, you move too. Not because you're ready, but because you understand. And as I walked forward, one thing was completely clear. She thought that call ended everything. But it didn't. It revealed it. And sometimes, that's more powerful than anything else.